everyone. Hello, good evening. My name is Neha Sangera, and I'm the Policy Director at Berkeley Food Institute. And on behalf of BFI and the Berkeley School of Journalism, I'm thrilled to welcome you all to tonight's program. Thanks for being here. So tonight we're going to hear from a panel of experts talking about a vision for California's food system future that's more healthy, more just, and more sustainable. And tonight's discussion is coming at a time when there's broadly increased awareness about the many challenges we face within our food system, from corporate control of what we eat to the lack of regulation of the many chemicals and compounds that are in our food supply, to just the general ease of access that we all have for foods that are highly processed and highly unhealthy. And with the passage of AB 64, as well as the range of investments that have been made in California on school foods, California is engaging on this very interesting and important experiment to show that through school foods, it is in fact possible to have real, minimally processed and sustainably grown food within school meals. And here at Berkeley Food Institute, we're working with our affiliated faculty and our community partners to help advance this vision for a food system that is rooted in agroecology and aligned with those principles. And we're involved in the evaluation team of the California Farm to School Grant Program. And in this work, we've just been delighted to see the type of work being done around the state on school foods. We're seeing values being uplifted like climate smart agriculture and environmental sustainability and an interest in supporting California's small and mid-sized farmers and BIPOC producers. And we're just seeing that California is saying loudly and clearly that ultra-processed foods do not belong in school foods. And so how do we get to this vision? How do we get to where we're trying to go? From the system that we have today around school food to this vision where there's alignment with the principles of agroecology. And are there lessons that we can learn from this fight for school food that can be applied to the broader fight for food justice for all of us? And maybe more specifically for today's discussion, with the passage of AB 1264, are we going to get closer to real food? Or are we just going to see reformulated Fruit Loops being served for breakfast? So tonight's panelists are going to dig into these questions and so much more. I'd like to thank our panelists for joining us today. And I will just introduce you all very quickly. So starting at the end, we have Beth Katz, who is the co-founder and executive director of Food Insight Group. And Beth is leading the evaluation of California's Farm to School Grant Program. We also have Erin Primer, who is the School Nutrition and Food Service Director at San Luis Coastal Unified School District. And Erin brings a very on-the-ground perspective of the realities of what it means to serve school meals. We also have Brian Ronholm, native of the Bay Area, Director of Food Policy at Consumer Reports. And we'll be bringing the perspective of how policy can be a vehicle for consumer protection. And Consumer Reports was one of the co-sponsors of AB 1264, which passed last session. And then finally, we have Laura Schmidt, a professor at UC San Francisco, bringing in expertise on the role of food companies and how they influence what we eat. And our moderator for tonight's discussion is Helena Bottomiller-Evich, founder and editor-in-chief of Food Fix, and also recently launched a new podcast called American Dish. And if I may say, if you aren't already a paid subscriber to Food Fix, do that as soon as you get home tonight because it's an incredible newsletter and very worth a paid subscription. So with that, I will take a quick moment to thank our sponsors who were instrumental in making tonight's program reality. Thank you to Tomcat Foundation, Good Earth Natural Foods, Casa Sanchez Foods, Food Insight Group, UC Berkeley School of Journalism, and USDA Transition to Organic Partnership Program. And just two quick reminders before we dive in today. This event is being recorded, and a recording will be available on BFI's YouTube page in the upcoming weeks. So if you know of anyone who wasn't able to make it today, we can absolutely forward a link to the recording. And then finally, please silence your phones. With that, I will turn it over to Helena. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. So because it's on YouTube, that means you can only ask the most amazing questions. You will be forever memorialized on YouTube. Thank you so much for having me and for this kind introduction. This is actually my first time on this campus, and it is beautiful. I was walking through your urban forest today. I mean, it's just really magical. And I understand I'm from Seattle. I know the weather's not always like this, but it's really been beautiful, so thank you. It's really a joy to be here. And also, I understand this has been a good opportunity for the Journalism School and the Berkeley Food Institute to collab, which I just love to see. I love to see that interdisciplinary collaboration. So happy to be part of that. I cover food policy in Washington. I've been doing that for about 15 years. And I think it's fair to say that California is usually a little bit ahead of the curve. I think there's many issues we could point to, trans fat and many other menu labeling, things like that. And this school meals conversation, I think, is one of those topics where nationally we are kind of looking at what California is doing, and maybe that is pointing the direction that the rest of the country will eventually go. We obviously are in a moment where we have an administration and a movement talking a lot about making America healthy again. This is a topic, a mainstream narrative we are now hearing a lot more about, especially from the right. We, I think, have long had this progressive, movement around eat real food and farm to school and, trying to regulate the food industry. That's kind of been there, but we are in a moment of sort of political realignment, and things are really noisy. I know, I'm right in the middle of it. There's a lot going on, and I'm hearing a lot about school meals. And to me, California's example of now, AB 1264, all the farm to school funding, the infrastructure funding, universal free school meals, all these pieces are now it's sort of like a policy laboratory. And nationally, the folks in Washington, people in other states are kind of looking to see, well, how is this going to work? Is this the way of the future? What is needed to transition away from some of the ultra-processed foods, which we'll get into? So I think what's happening here in California is really a national story. And the rest of us in policy world are looking to it. So I think that there's a lot to be learned, and I'm really excited to get into it. This is a really fantastic panel, truly some incredible experts, and really coming at it from different vantage points. So I want to give each of you just a quick couple of minutes to talk about your work, how you relate to this issue, just to kind of ground us, and then we'll get right into it. So Laura, we're going to start with you.
Yeah, hi everybody. I work across the Bay at UCSF in the School of Medicine, and I work in a field that's emerging within public health. We call ourselves the Commercial Determinants of Health field, and it's an international field, and we're really focused on looking at private corporations and industries that harm health. And whether it's the tobacco industry, the food industry, the fossil fuel industry, these are really some of the main vectors for disease in the 21st century. And so the field of public health is trying to galvanize itself to try to understand health-harming corporations as vectors of disease. And like any vector, you want to be able to understand its behavior so you can anticipate it, and you can think about ways to mitigate the harms that are caused to protect public health. One of the methodologies that my lab uses quite a bit is industry documents research. And this emerged during the tobacco war in the late 20th century as a key methodology for trying to get under the hood and understand what health-harming industries are really about. Over at UCSF, we have an archive of 19 million documents from inside the tobacco industry. And it just so happens that during the period in the 20th century that these documents cover, the largest tobacco companies in America owned the largest food companies in America. And so we, unbeknownst to myself until about a decade ago, We have been sitting on top of millions of documents that allow us to penetrate and understand what the food industry is up to, how they formulate foods, often information that is held very secret because it's viewed as proprietary trade secrets. And what I can say is that when you look at what these companies have been up to, since the 80s and 90s, the ultra-processed food industry, what you see is a real focus on kids. We know that the tobacco industry was very interested in targeting children because it was a strategy for building brand loyalty at a young age. And if you think about things from the standpoint of a food company executive, if you can hook a kid on your brand, that means you save money for the lifetime of that child as they become an adult. They stay loyal to your brand rather than to go to your competitor. So this is a very important strategy, and this is why the ultra-processed food companies are in our schools. I see lots of documents in the archive about Channel 1 and getting on the TV in the public schools, about how to Lunchables and products that have made it into the school lunch program were developed by tobacco-owned food corporations. And so I think it's very important for us to be looking at school meals because the companies themselves have been looking at them for a long time.
When you just said Channel 1, that sent me straight back to high school and middle school, and I forgot about Channel 1. We should talk about that. Okay, Brian? Who remembers? That was the TV network that we watched every morning.
Absolutely, and
It was
great
like our
marketing
little
opportunity.
Whew, wow, I have questions. Okay, Brian.
Yeah, so I'm Brian Ronholm, and I lead food policy for Consumer Reports. I want to thank BFI for the invitation to be with you all today. As Neha mentioned, that I'm a Bay Area native, so it was a very easy invitation to accept. I'm based out of Washington, D.C. now. Please don't hold that against me, but I come in peace. So some of you may be wondering, like, how does Consumer Reports, the magazine, hopefully you're all familiar with the magazine and will subscribe and support us, how do they get involved in an issue like this? I'll just give you a sense of how we're structured. So we obviously have the publication side that everyone's familiar with that reviews cars, appliances, all kinds of consumer products. And then we have the science and testing side, which actually does all of the testing, including food products. Mentioned Lunchables, and that's one of our big testing projects from the last couple years. And then we have the advocacy side, which is where I'm at. We're kind of the unruly degenerates of Consumer Reports. We're the ones that make a lot of the noise, trying to push for policy changes. And that's kind of where my background is on the policy making, political science side. So before I joined Consumer Reports, my background was in political science, public policy. I was a congressional staffer for Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro from Connecticut, who's very active on food issues. And then I joined the Obama administration in 2011 at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, where I continue to work on food safety. And so I've been with Consumer Reports for over 6 years. And as was mentioned, we are one of the primary co-sponsors of AB 1264, along with the Environmental Working Group, EWG, and also Eat Real, which I believe is based here in the Bay Area. And it was just such a great partnership, a kind of a harmonic convergence of just amazing stakeholder groups coming together, an amazing legislator, and the great dynamics that exist that I know that we'll get into. And that's kind of how we became involved in this issue.
Yeah, and it didn't almost pass unanimously, or did it pass unanimously? Wow. Right. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm proud to be up here with this ragtag group of amazing misfits. I'm Erin Primer. I am the Director of Food and Nutrition Services at San Luis Coastal Unified. We're in San Luis Obispo on the central coast of California. And we've really been on a journey of school food. 10 years ago, when I started in the district, we had 15 different kinds of packaged processed pizza, none of which were good. So we've really been on a journey of how do we break away from this status quo that is so heavily influenced in school food? How do we introduce scratch cooking, training for our teams, equipment, infrastructure, education for our students? And we've been able to partner with some fantastic agencies to really push this idea forward. You mentioned earlier this idea of values. Typically, when we think of school food, I'm not sure values really come to mind. So to really set forward in farm to school initiatives, scratch cooking, and really carry the torch for what's possible in school food is really what I'm here to share with you all tonight.
Amazing. All right, Beth.
Hi everybody, I'm Beth Katz. I'm the Executive Director of Food Insight Group. We do food systems research and evaluation, often with the explicit goal to inform policy. For the, past 5 years or so, we've really had an explicit focus on the school food system. And so as Neha mentioned, we are working on the evaluation of California's Healthy School Food Pathway Incubator Grant Program. It's a bit of a mouthful. And we've been working on that since about 2022. We're also evaluating another one of California's investments in the school food system. It's called the Healthy School Food Pathway Program. So it's run by the Chef Ann Foundation. It was launched first in California, but is spreading across the country. And it's really the first pre-apprenticeship, apprenticeship, workforce training program for school food operators and school food service workers, really aiming at increasing cooking in schools. And so I mentioned these two programs because part of what I really want to convey tonight is that not only is California leading through AB 1264 and this, regulatory approach, but they're also really investing. And I think that is going to be the key to really shifting what school foods look like in California and nationally. So when I say investing, this is really trying to undo decades of underinvestment and undervaluing the system, not only from the worker perspective or the supply chain perspective, but even in school kitchen infrastructure. So there are a lot of schools around the country, including in California, that don't have kitchens anymore. Those that do have kitchens often lack cooking equipment. Those that have cooking equipment may have a staff that was hired to open boxes and reheat already made foods. So they weren't hired to cook. And when we're talking about transforming school meals in California and nationally, we often, I think, leave out of the conversation the people who we're expecting to do that work. Those are the frontline school food service workers. It's Erin and her team. And I'm excited to talk more about what it would look like to actually meaningfully reinvest in workers, in infrastructure, and then also in the whole supply chain. So bringing more local, values-aligned food back into schools.
Yeah, I want to start kind of picking up on that thread. For those who maybe haven't been in a school recently or haven't thought much about school food, why we're having this conversation about getting ultra-processed foods out of school meals, but why are a large portion of the foods we're feeding now in these or serving now in these school meals programs, why are they so ultra-processed? I mean, you mentioned lack of equipment, but maybe just expound on that a little bit. Why is the status quo in a lot of ways, we should expect the result kind of that we have, right, because of this disinvestment. But just start there, why, and then maybe Erin, you talk about a little bit more about your journey of how you went from trying to peel back, not eliminating them, but shifting, because it's not as simple as just let's cook. It may sound simple, people are like, oh, just cook, but go into that a little bit. Why is the status quo the way it is?
Right, so I think it's two things happening at one time. It is, like I said, decades of disinvestment. We are not paying for school meals what they cost to produce at the status quo even, let alone really investing in this transformation to get toward what I think probably all of us in this room imagine when we think of better school meals. We think of all the values of, we've got Center for Good Food Purchasing here. It's the valued workforce. It's the whole supply chain. So we have these decades of disinvestment. We have the crumbling kitchen infrastructure, et cetera. And at the same time, as Laura mentioned, we have a food manufacturing sector that is extremely good at making cheap products that match regulations. And when the regulations change, they can reformulate. And so it has often become easier for school districts to buy a ready-made solution than to try to figure out how to remake their own menus, redesign their own recipes, and that for that to happen in every single district across the country, it's actually much easier in a lot of cases, again, given the disinvestment, to just go with what the food manufacturers are providing. Yeah. So I think that is the important kind of backdrop to understand, is that it's these two things happening at one time. in a system that was designed to be as cheap as possible. Cheap
Yeah.
food, cheap labor.
Yeah, I think that's really good context. Erin, do you want to weigh in on that? Like why, like if a parent were to have asked you 10 years ago, why does school food look this way? Like, I think when you came into it, you maybe understood why.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's exactly it. It's fast, cheap, and easy. We've learned that this has been a key driver in a lot of these manufacturing decisions, not necessarily best for our health outcomes. And so when we think about operators who are challenged with infrastructure, with staffing, with time, right, it really comes down to time. And we're serving so many students that we need an answer that's going to be quick, but it doesn't necessarily have to be fast, cheap, and easy. And I think that's really what we're looking at, where operators today are more interested in doing that hard work. When I look at colleagues in the K-12 sector, are there some who are not quite ready for this journey? Sure. But there are a lot more today who are already doing this work, who are already investing in their local communities, who are connecting with local farms, food businesses, people who can provide higher quality ingredients so that we can really start working outside of some of this mass manufacturing. But it really is about this idea of how do we feed a large number of students with as great of food as possible, but also with these restraints of time and labor and skill. And so a lot of K-12 districts right now are working with partners. Partners like the Chef Ann Foundation, getting more skilled labor, partners like Eat Real, who are really helping us define what are values in a school meal program? How do we support one another in achieving those things? And it's also going to take the investment of cost and funding. If we want something better, it's likely going to be a little more costly. We're going to have to really invest in these programs. And I think we're going to get into some of the investments that California has made to really lead the charge on what's possible when we actually have those investments.
Yeah, I want to bring in AB 1264 a bit because it's kind of all the things working together. Like you have a regulation or a law. You have a law in the books now with that looming. You have that, and then it's kind of working together with all these investments. But Brian, can you talk a little bit more about what that law actually does and like why that, like how that fits into the puzzle here? I know
Yeah.
you're not working on like school infrastructure, but it is sort of
Right.
like all these puzzle pieces together.
Yeah, the biggest accomplishment of AB 1264 was coming up with a regulatory definition
Yeah.
of a UPF.
And
Something
the first
in black and white.
government to do so.
Exactly. First
Scott Faber is
regulatory
always
body.
emailing, going,
Right.
California's first in the world.
Right,
Like,
exactly, right. We're like,
Yeah.
we're all emailing. This is so
Yeah.
critical, and
because no other government has.
Right. No
yeah.
other regulatory entity anywhere in the world has come up with a regulatory definition.
Yep.
And so this is the first of its kind. And it's so important because, and we can go through kind of what specifically it does, but it's so important because that is what's been the barrier for moving forward with any type of regulatory policy on ultra-processed foods. And the industry has been very good about using that excuse. Like, oh, well, we can't address UPFs because there isn't a regulatory definition. And oh, by the way, we're going to do everything that we can to prevent any definition from being formulated as a result of that. So the industry has been historically very good at that, not just in this, but like on food safety. And I don't know, like salmonella is a perfect example. It's like, you'll hear words like we need sound science, and it sounds earnest and reasonable, but ultimately it's just a stalling tactic. So that's the most critical part, is that it comes up with that definition, and then it takes that next step of, okay, let's use that definition and identify the most harmful ultra-processed foods that could end up in schools. And so I think the final language ended up being UPFs of concern. And when we started out, it was like, what are the harmful ultra-processed foods? So it's one of those things where the terminology.
yeah.
So
Was
the
that
terminology.
a negotiation?
Yeah, I mean, it's right. Legislation,
Yeah.
sausage make, it's an imperfect process.
Yeah. I mean, you did
right.
get it to pass unanimously. So you were
Exactly.
trying to get a lot of people
and
on
honestly,
board.
that is a credit to Assembly Member Jesse Gabriel. This is one of the most effective legislators that I've ever seen, just from a state and federal.
Wow. Is he in here? Is that who that's clapping? No, just kidding. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
It's-
I mean, I understand that, like, compromises were made to try to make it like a big tent thing, right?
Right.
To not have because there was definitely opposition.
For sure, for
And
sure. So
you
when
were-
you see something, when you read a particular definition, it's like, oh, well, that's kind of unusual. Why is that in there?
There's always a story.
Right. There's
Yeah.
always a story.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So then where is the process now? So it's by 2035.
32.
2032. What's the
Yeah,
timeline?
ultimately, the final date is 2035, where it's completely eliminated from school foods. But it's 2032 is when they're coming up with a final definition.
I gotcha. Okay,
right.
for what needs to be removed.
Right,
Okay.
the harmful ones.
So the wheels are turning. This is kind of looming off in the distance.
It's
We
gonna
also
be- yeah,
we also have
right.
USDA. We think maybe updating the rules, unclear. And then FDA and USDA are also coming up with the
Working on
definition
definition.
for ultra processed food.
Don't hold your breath.
We'll see. Secretary Kennedy said it was coming out in like April or May, and I was like, oh, well, that's, we'll see. Laura, I want to talk to you briefly about like, anyone, feel free to weigh in. Like, what are the potential pitfalls? I think in the intro we were mentioning like, is AB 1264, like does it actually move schools more towards scratch cooking, which it seems like is a value that a lot of people here in California have? Or is there a risk that it just results in like reformulation and, food companies saying, hey, look, we have the solution to meet this, and, here's your just as processed option with maybe fewer additives or whatever it ends up being. Like, what is the risk? I guess, is there are there potential pitfalls to this approach?
Yeah, there's a huge pitfall, and that is industry interference. I think we can count on it. One of my students wrote her dissertation on the Mexican soda tax, and by the way, we have a soda tax person for the Berkeley soda tax here in the room for people who are interested.
I covered that.
And after the tax passed, there was a whole round of getting the industry trying to get it unpassed, right? So they don't let up. And so I think one of the biggest risks, and you guys can speak to the implementation side of things, and there are many pitfalls there, but one of the biggest risks is that the industry will get in the middle of this. So essentially, their law has a definition, but then to figure out, okay, is processed meat product, is that a UPF of concern? I sure hope it becomes one, because the epidemiological evidence shows processed meat is one of the biggest offenders next to sugar-sweetened beverages when it comes to population health. So the health department in Sacramento has to analyze that, and there are many, many opportunities for the industry to, we have science. I love this one. We have science that shows that actually no, processed meat is fine for children. And they'll bring it out of the journals, and then it'll be yet another fight for people like me who don't take money from the food industry to say, well, actually, no, that's not true. All of this stuff is in the medical journals. The industry-funded scientists get into the medical journals. And so I think there's plenty of room for the industry to interfere in that process. And then it has to go to the governor's desk. Now, we know that and the governor has to sign it. That will be a different governor from our current governor. Historically, Jerry Brown was in bed with the soda industry, and we wound up with laws that make it impossible for us to have cities around California that have soda taxes like Berkeley.
That was a huge deal. Yeah.
Yes, it's called preemption. And so there are many ways that the industry, and I promise you, they will be involved. That's their modus operandi. And so I think that's at the level of the legislation and defining what is a UPF of concern. They have a lot of interest and will descend upon Sacramento to try to interfere with that process and keep neutral scientists who don't have conflicts of interest out of the mix.
Yeah, so you're saying there's like a long road ahead, is what I'm hearing. That's what I'm hearing.
2032 is a long time for them to muck up the gears.
Yes. Erin, I'm curious, like, what are you hearing from other school nutrition directors about this law? Like, is there trepidation? Is it excitement? Is it a mix? Like, or is it kind of wanting to see what the ultimate definition is? Like, what's the vibe? What's the vibe check?
It's a mix. Let's be clear, right? It's a mix. I will tell you that I was at an event with colleagues, and this was right before the bill had passed, and someone stood up in the room and said, "What are we going to do if we can't serve Fruit Loops?" Thank you for laughing. I appreciate that. But I think
they weren't laughing in the room, were they?
there was not laughter in the room when it was said. And so this I appreciate because we're on the same page here. But I think that's the gut reaction, right? The gut reaction is something's going to change and it's going to affect the things that I do, and that's scary, right? Now the good news is there are enough of us in K-12 who like to live dangerously, right? And so we're not afraid of these things. Now, what I will tell you is that with the passing of this bill, even though the implementation won't actually happen for many, many years, there are many of us who are already starting this. There are many people who are saying, wow, well, if that's a concern now that we're saying is going to be in the future, maybe we should change what we're doing now. One of those examples is with hot dogs. Let's be real. It's those dang hot dogs, right? We stopped serving them. We were like, no, we're not doing it. It's too hard to explain to students when it's okay and when it's not okay. And my issue with these copycat snacks are the dreaded Fruit Loops. Now, when I say Fruit Loop, I want to be really clear that this means that Kellogg's has reformulated their product to be compliant to serve in school food. So there are sugar standards. There is a whole grain element, right? Here's the craziest part. You cannot buy that at the grocery store. Isn't that wild?
There's an alternate food system for K through 12. Yeah.
Yes. And so this is the scary part where a lot of foods are being reformulated and recreated to meet these requirements. But it's
Thanks to Michelle Obama. That was an Obama era thing.
Which is great. But the problem is that there are now manufacturers who believe that they need to have these two systems of realities. That's got to be a nightmare. Why are we not looking at having these reformulated products be the standard, or at least an option for parents and families looking to buy these things in the grocery store? As a K-12 food operator, not only is my job to procure food, to cook it, to make it appealing for kids, but at the end of the day, my job is really to set kids up for a lifetime of healthy eating. And if I can do that at the grade school level, now we're going to talk about getting somewhere in this world, right? So the decisions that I make as an operator are so critical so that it's easy for a 7-year-old to know, hey, if I eat Fruit Loops and chocolate milk at school, if I continue to do this at home and throughout my life, this is going to set me up for a great, healthy life. But that's not true if I'm serving Fruit Loops and chocolate milk, right? Especially this reformulated concept. So it's really important that no matter what we talk about in terms of what the law or legislation is going to be, that when we're talking about kids, we have to make sure that the healthy choice is the default choice and that we're positioning that as a great choice. When we do that, now we have the opportunity to really affect what kids are eating, what they want to put in their mouths. And so the good news is that there are a lot of operators who are already doing that, regardless of what the legislation is going to say. There are also some food manufacturers who have caught on to this early. And I'll tell you that one of the items that we do procure, it's a California product, and it's a concha, it's a pan dulce. I'm not making them. I'm so sorry. Don't come to my district and want to know if I've baked them all. I haven't. Yeah. But they had a neon pink color, right? The most popular one, kids loved it. But we stopped buying it. We were like, if this isn't going to work in 2030, it's not going to work now. So the company has now completely removed food dyes from their program. It's made with whole grain, and they're using hibiscus and radish for a rosier color pink. It's not bright. But I think these are the opportunities where we can partner together. The answer isn't zero manufacturing. I wish it were. But the reality is not there. So if we can at least clean up this system with products that are going to meet the regulations in a more authentic way, I think we're going to be okay.
Can I just jump in real quick?
Yeah.
From a policy perspective, all the great work that Erin has outlined and talked about how a lot of the work is already being done. You know, the implementation dates was another item that was negotiated in the bill. It makes it easier to extend those compliance dates when you know that a lot of the work is already being done.
Yeah. Well, and I think like having it be, you cut off some of the opposition by being like, you have time. You have time to do this, even though it sounds like it is a long time frame. School food is complex. I've been in many schools over the last 15 years, and if there's anything I learned, it's that there's nothing simple about serving 30 million kids every day in America on a few bucks. Like, there's just nothing simple about it. It is extremely complex. It looks different everywhere you go, and it is like this it's like a miraculous system that it works, but you peel behind it, you're like, wow, this is really complex. complicated. So Beth, I want to get into this a bit. Like, how do you see AB 1264 fitting in with the other things that California is doing, which is fun, a lot of it's funding. Like,
Yeah.
I went to we went to the Berkeley Central Kitchen yesterday. Was it yesterday? Mm-hmm. Yeah, yesterday. And they have, a chiller to help chill the food so that they do a lot of the prep in the central kitchen. They set it out. Just the chiller is $70,000. Just the chiller. And it was kind of cool. Like, it's like big enough you can get inside of it, And I'm like, the average school that now maybe needs a chiller for their central kitchen, like, that's a lot of money. That's more than they pay a staff member for a year. Like, so how does the regulation that's coming work with these other pieces that California's pouring in a ton of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're like,
Go
other states are not quite
states are not.
spending that much money, but they're starting to pass some, there's starting to be more attention at the state level, for sure.
Yeah. So I just want to put a couple things into perspective. One thing is, we talked about the Farm to School grant program. California started that in 2021. There have been 3 funding cycles so far. So 3 cycles of grantees. They have already put almost $100 million through that grant program across 3 cycles. The USDA has had a Farm to School grant program since 2013. They have also put $100 million through that grant program. Wow. And no other state comes close to California. So this scale, I just want to pause on the scale of California's investment. It's not just Farm to School. It's also, California was the first state in the country to pass universal free school meals. So every kid in the state gets a free breakfast and a free lunch every day of the school week. And with that came a higher reimbursement rate as well, because as I already said, the reimbursement rate from the federal level is absolutely not high enough. As Erin can speak to, that reimbursement rate, so School Food Finances 101. The way school food programs are funded is through a per meal reimbursement, mostly just from the federal level. And that per meal reimbursement, let's average it out to $4, there are complexities there, has to pay not only for the food, but also all of the staff. It also has to pay in most districts for electricity and water in the school kitchens. They are renting the space from the district effectively. So that the amount of the per meal reimbursement that's left over for food is minuscule. So the money is just incredibly, incredibly important. And California recognizes that school meals are not only a public health intervention, they can really support positive student health outcomes and educational outcomes, but it can also be an intervention for our local food systems, for our local economies, for helping to nudge the agricultural sector, which of course in California is massive, toward more climate smart, it's the state's term, more environmentally friendly agricultural practices. It can be a labor intervention, so we can actually invest in a workforce that is vastly predominated by women. And so there are all these other things that we can get if we invest in the school food system. And so the way I think this complements AB 1264 is that they're kind of all pointing in the same direction. They're taking different approaches, but they're indicating that California really wants fresher meals, more local procurement, better working conditions for the people who are doing all of this incredibly important work every day. And so yeah, I think they are synergistic. I think the sort of common ancestor for both local procurement and for getting ultra-processed foods out of school meals is cooking. So the thing that I really appreciate and am so impressed with California for having the foresight to do is to really embed workforce across a lot of their funding initiatives. So it's Farm to Schools, it's universal free meals, it's also, they have a massive fund for kitchen infrastructure and training. That's how Rich of BOSD got his blast chiller for $70,000. And most of these investments, just to say, have been since about 2021, 2022. So it's been, I think, like over $1 billion a year, I think, since then, roughly, of investment across the school food system. So incredibly impressive and really synergistic with the regulation.
Yeah, and I think is more than like we're spending federally to move in that direction. Just in California, just to put that in perspective. It is actually like crazy to see how much attention there is here, and then I like zoom out and I'm like, what have we been talking about in DC? And it's like not this. Like, we're not talking about this. We're not talking about the amount of investment. It does sometimes come up when I always ask the ag secretary about school meals. Like, I'm like the one who's like, hey, what's going on with school meals? You know, I ate school meals growing up. Like, I love covering this issue, and also a lot of reporters don't really cover it. It's like this very undercovered thing. So I'm always like what's going on? And only recently have I heard this come up, the equipment thing. Like, it's starting to kind of like get into the cabinet level discussion of like, okay, whatever we're gonna do. Like, there is starting to be an acknowledgement of like the equipment constraints, like, and these are very real. And it's not just equipment, it's staff. Like, the more I've learned about staffing, like, I didn't realize that some elementary schools, or I think it's typical to have like one staff member, maybe one and a half day, and they're serving like hundreds of children. I mean, how would that one person all of a sudden you flip a switch and be like, oh, you are now cooking from scratch for 400 kids, and you got to get them through the line in 20 minutes. I mean, good luck. Like, that is a tall order. So I'm starting to hear it. I'm starting to hear that, like, but you know, it takes money. So I don't know where this is going to go. I do want to zoom out just a tiny bit on this idea that we're now talking about ultra-processed foods, because this is also new. Like, at the same time California is embarking on this, we are hearing more about ultra-processed foods and the links to, you know, negative health outcomes. We're hearing, you know, Secretary Kennedy talk about this. Laura, I'm curious, like, what do you think about this moment we're in where we are hearing a lot from the highest levels of government about ultra-processed foods? We're maybe going to get a definition. Brian's like, we'll see. Where do you see that going, and like, how does that fit into this? Like, because the ultra-processed foods issue is much bigger than just school meals, and so we sort of have these two things happening at the same time.
Well, I think it's huge. I've been working in this area for a long time, and it's felt like watching a train wreck in slow motion. We don't see changes in childhood disease prevalence quite like we've seen without some massive environmental insult. I used to, 10 years ago, I was talking about childhood diabetes is the global warming of public health. It's telling us something's really, really wrong when children are developing diseases of adulthood. And since that time, we're now talking about fatty liver disease, which is highly, highly prevalent in kids. And now we're starting to talk about young adults developing colon cancer. Now, there's something really fishy here. These are not changes that you typically see in public health statistics. And so I think that, honestly, I think I welcome a conversation from the Republican side of the House on this topic. I think it's amazing that they own the issue. I'm still beside myself that we're talking about this. Now, we may not agree completely on the means, on the how, and I worry a lot about the narrative around personal responsibility as opposed to public responsibility, and I hear that a lot in the narratives that on the Republican side about how we're going to deal with this problem. But the fact that we're even talking about it is a very welcome thing from my standpoint, and I can only imagine, you know, when Mexico passed the first soda tax for health reasons in the world, it was really about a population of people who had advanced kidney disease, and the government literally could not afford to pay for the dialysis. Like, that's what moves country.
It's a breaking point.
It's a breaking point. Mm-hmm. And I think we're at it here in America. We really are in a position where we just can't sustain the levels of chronic disease that we're seeing in our population, and the inequities are astounding. And this is why school food is so important, because the kids who are getting this healthy diet come from across the spectrum. It's a universal program. And that's the kind of intervention that we need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Brian, I'm curious, what do you think is going to happen? Like, we may get a definition, and then what? Or we may not get a definition. What do you think is going to happen? Because right now, there is a very big gap between the rhetoric that we've seen on MAHA and the policy actions so far. I think the next 6 to 12 months are going to tell us a lot, because
Yeah.
we're things are either going to be moving forward or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So what do you think's
absolutely
going to
right,
happen?
because when you look at what MAHA has accomplished over the past year and a half, just kind of specific, concrete regulatory proposals, there's really nothing there. There's been a
There's
lot
nothing
of...
on the regulatory,
Right,
the,
I mean,
the
you know, this-
docket.
right.
Us policy nerds look at the.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't want to get too inside Washington baseball and all that, but yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of grand announcements, events, press conferences, press releases announcing that we're changing this, we're banning synthetic food dyes. But then when you do a little bit of digging, it's like, well, they're relying on a voluntary effort that may or may not happen. So it's things like that where there's a lot of sound and fury, but ultimately it's signifying nothing, at least so far. And to Helena's point, the next few months will tell a good story. What MAHA has been very effective, and Laura alludes to this, to have all of these topics get discussed in a mainstream way over a consistent basis over the past year has been extraordinary. Like how we would have, like, if a 60 Minutes did a piece on generally recognized as safe grass, 10 years ago, all of us who worked on food policy would have peed our pants.
Yeah, you'd be like, what?
Right?
Yeah, if you missed the segment, go watch it. It was on 60 Minutes recently about grass reform, which is about food additives, and also is about ultra-processed carbohydrates, and I mean,
Exactly. Something like that
Yeah.
is getting so much more
Prime time.
attention.
Yeah.
Prime time that
Yeah.
would have never happened.
Yeah.
And this is
Yeah.
where Democrats lost a good opportunity to own this issue over the past several decades. So, you know, they brought it to the forefront, and as a result of using that bully pulpit very effectively, you had states like West Virginia, Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas actively moving forward with legislation on these issues. Like, that never would have happened. And, you know, it's one of those things where, yeah, Democrats kind of lost the opportunity of that, but at the same time, there's no way that they would have been able to do that without any type of facilitation from the MAHA movement.
Yeah, and it does seem to be cracking out of this like left coded thing. Like it's now cracking open into this like, well, we'll see like who takes it on going forward. But it's, I don't want to say it's nonpartisan because it's not, and bipartisan seems a little strong too because they're not really working together.
it's sort
but
of-
it's cracking out of this
Yeah.
like, oh, that's just a lefty thing. Like that,
Right.
that is changing.
It's
Yeah.
MAHA, RFK Jr., and Trump giving permission to these Republican state
Yes.
legislators to move forward with something without any political harm.
Yeah, yeah. And there, it's interesting that the food industry is losing very much at the state level. Like the MAHA moms are winning at the state level. DC, we're not sure yet because there's some bigger fights happening. But at the state level, I mean, some of these MAHA activists they're taking down state bills that that agrochemical companies want. And they're losing, like to moms and advocates at the state level, which I have not seen happen, like in my time covering this stuff. And you're like, oh, but Congress is a little bit of a different beast. I'm curious on the school food front, like how much do you think MAHA is changing or just this general like awareness? Is it changing how you're hearing? Like, are parents more like interested in school food? Do they have more questions? Is this like always good? Are the emails always good that you're getting from parents? Is the interest good, or are you like, oh boy, here's another one? Are they asking you about seed oils? Like what, you know what I mean? Like what are you hearing from parents, and is it changing at all?
You know, I think that it's important for us to acknowledge that the work in school food has been done for a long time.
Yes.
These are not new conversations for us. The idea of minimally processed, more scratch cooking, these are conversations that many operators have been having for many years. More popular now.
You're not doing it because of Instagram?
What? I know. And so I think I get a little like,
You're like, I've been on a
Okay.
10-year journey. I've been on a 10-year
Correct.
journey. Yes.
Correct. And that's just
now
in
everyone's
my
at your party.
district.
Now
Correct.
Everyone's at your party.
Correct. But I'm with you. I think what we're seeing now is interest. I mean, just curious, in this room, how many of you are directly involved in K-12 schools? Kat, I see you. Okay, a fair number of us, right? But what I love is that so many of you are not. Now, 10 years ago, if you would have told me that I was going to sit in a room with non-K-12 people having deep dialogue about the future of K-12 food, I probably would have laughed. So the fact that we're having these conversations, we're continuing to have the conversation, and it's become more of a center of the plate is really exciting. So I'm with you that we're on to something. I also agree that we're not in alignment on everything, but there is a lot of opportunity to find where there is alignment and start from that place. In terms of what parents are asking, I'll tell you the biggest change for us happened during the pandemic when we had to figure out how to feed kids without them physically being at school. Any of you remember that time? Yeah, that was some rough stuff. But we did it, and we learned a lot. Right? We learned how quick we could be at decision making. We learned that parents saw school food for the first time, right? Parents weren't coming to school with their kid prior or now, but during the pandemic, those meals were going home. So the quality of ingredients that we were selecting, the messaging around food at that time really helped us develop trust. So when we came back to in-person learning, and with California leading the way for this school meal for all, this universal free meal, we've seen increases in our program and participation since that time. And so I think that's important for us to recognize that this did not just start. This is something that's been continuing and evolving, and that, I think, is where we've really seen parents trust and see what's going on in school food. So I'm hesitant to say that it's some new latest and greatest trend. Here's the beauty. Since we've been on that journey for so long and parents have really seen what our program is about, we're advertising those farms and calling out those ingredients and sharing those things. I haven't received a single Maha email.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's not causing this great debate or this great discussion in my own district.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that other operators are exempt from that.
Yeah.
But I think we're seeing a focus on, real food sounds great. Right?
Yeah.
And they're seeing that this is happening and possible in schools. It is very difficult, but possible. And I feel like that's the agreement that we can all come to. But I would be remiss if I didn't at least plug, we can't stop until it's nationwide. What we have done in California, what we have shown works, a free breakfast and a free lunch every day. You brought it up earlier, this idea of equity. What that has done in our programs is it's completely taken out the stigma behind school meals. And when we tried to push this work forward, prior to having this free meal, it was the program for the poor kids. Let's be clear, right? So to move us out of that model and move us into a program that is of value, that provides high quality food that is wanted, this desire has completely destigmatized what we do. This is what has allowed the increase in participation. This is what ensures, no matter how you got here, no matter what's in the fridge at home, you matter, we're gonna feed you, it's gonna be good. If we could have a system based on that, I think all these other pieces really fall into play. So nationwide, school meals for all, just have to give my quick plug. Thank you.
Love that. And keep it Erin's not in charge yet, but she may eventually be in charge. Yeah. Beth, I want you to pick up on some of that thread. Like, what role do you think parents being interested is or isn't playing in this? And could parents help with future budgetary constraints? Because all of this funding, I think, relies somewhat on the state being in a good budgetary place, and that's never guaranteed, and sounds like maybe is getting tougher here. What role, I guess, do parents play, and are you hearing from them more? Do you think more of them are weighing in?
That's a great question. I don't know if more of them are weighing in, but I know they have always weighed in on school food.
They have thoughts.
And
yeah,
they've always had thoughts. And to be clear, we have never had a perfect school food system or program in this country. It's never like there's no make school food good again. We are still building it, and we still have opportunity to determine what the values are that we want baked into it. So who is it for? Really fundamental question. California has said it is for all kids, and I, of course, agree completely with Erin that should be true nationwide. We still also need to keep pushing for this to continue in California. It's not a done deal. None of the funding that we've gotten so far is necessarily going to continue. It really depends on the budget year. It depends on our leadership, on the next administration, on other elected officials. But it also really depends on advocates. We have some great advocates here tonight who worked really hard to put California in a position to take advantage of good budget years. This was not a new idea and it happened overnight. So I think the role of parents is critical in continuing to pay attention. Have lunch with your kids. I do it. It's fun. You get to see what they eat. And so it's that. It's also building relationships with your school food service workers and the director in the district. It's actually becoming an ally, I think, for school food. And then understanding what are all of the groups, all of the advocacy organizations, all of the TA providers that already exist in the network that are supporting and pushing school meals to move forward into this bright future that we're building here in California. So yeah, I would say that. I would say eat school food. Build strong relationships, pay attention to what's happening at the state and federal levels, and advocate, because this is not a done deal. We are not finished with school food in California or in this country.
Yeah, and I think even though California is doing so much to push forward on scratch cooking, it's still not the average experience in California.
Yeah.
There's so many early adopters, but it's not like if you were to go to any random school in the state that they would be eating your. What were you telling me about the fancy limes? You have these really cool finger limes. Yes, I mean as like a garnish, and just as an example of like that's so exciting and cool, this new thing to try and whatever. But that's not the baseline experience. Right. That is still a wow, look at your program. You're a leader and an early adopter. So I don't know that we'll ever get to that point, but you can hold out hope for that. We're getting a couple good questions that you all submitted, and we are going to have time for questions. So think about questions you want to ask. This one popped in, and I think this is a good one. Other than California, what other states are leading on actions to limit UPF consumption, either in schools or generally? Like, Brian, you talked a little bit about what like other states are being interested in. What are you seeing outside of California, and how could that play a role here? Like, I know there's a handful of other states that have banned additives or I don't know, Brian, you want to weigh in?
Up to 45? Well,
Yeah.
You'll fill in the gaps.
Yeah, and so one thing that
You're busy. I feel like you're going to a lot of states.
I know, right? There's one thing that states are really good at is that it's copying each other. So when a really good bill passes one state, another state will see it and pick it up. And so that's what we'll likely see with this AB 1264. We really haven't seen it in earnest yet, although sometimes bills pop up out of nowhere without any warning, and so conceivably it could happen. But I think there's also kind of a misconception of what UPF is, and so we've seen some instances where states have introduced legislation and calling it a UPF bill, when in fact it's just maybe taking a step to ban a particular dye or chemical.
Right.
I mean, that certainly contributes to the
Right.
definition. It doesn't really deal with the UPF issue as a whole. So we're definitely going to see more states jumping in and just testing the waters. There's that legislator in Pennsylvania that's really active on the issue, Natalie Mahalik, that you saw at the Food Policy Conference. New York, it's
Republicans
right.
and Democrats. Yeah.
I mean, it's not just traditional blue states, which typically has happened. You're going to see a lot of red states trying to take a crack at this as well.
Yeah. What do you see happening? Do you think, and will they go after UPF generally? Because it does seem like that is sort of missing here, that it's easier to go like, we're just going to take a dye out. We're going to do, that's easy, it's specific. But you really look at UPF as a construct of the industry and like how they think about this in terms of, bliss point and like the whole thing.
Absolutely.
And how you look at policy is sort of difficult. I don't know that we're really to the point where we're looking at policy that sort of matches what you have.
Well, I think we have to start from realizing, like, for example, Brazil, they banned UPF from their schools, and they are doing something very similar to what we're aspiring to do. Brazil has a dietary share of UPF in their population of around 20%. Kids in America are up in the lower 60s in terms of how much UPF they're consuming on a daily basis. If you go to a grocery store and you just measure what's in the food supply, it's around 70%. So we're in a very different position than a lot of nation states around the world that are trying to regulate this stuff because we have such a big dietary share. We are home to these companies, so it's no surprise. And we have had a very weak regulations at the federal level for a very long time. We've let these companies do what they want. Don't even get me started on gras, where there's effectively no regulation. And
that's
so
to get certain additives, flavors to the market without FDA oversight.
without any oversight
Yeah, or
whatsoever.
knowledge, really. Yeah.
And so we
Different
literally
panel-
don't
different
know
panel
what we're
discussion on
eating.
that.
Yeah, that's part 2 of this series.
Yeah.
And so we have to think about where we're starting from. If you try to put a warning label, like many, many countries around the world have figured out how to create a statutory definition of UPF and regulate it, right? But when it's 70% of what's in the grocery store, everything's going to have a warning label on it.
Yeah.
So we have to think about our own country and our own specific needs and how it took us 40 years to get here with virtually no regulation. So now we need to dial it down. And I think that we have to be respectful of where we're at as a country, and starting with kids is absolutely ground zero for this battle. No question whatsoever on that. And so when I look around, I think what I see that is not getting as much attention, except from people like you, is the litigation front. So the San Francisco city attorney just announced that he is suing the food industry, 10 companies, on behalf of the citizens of San Francisco. And the reason is because he is arguing that this food is addictive. Now, when you look at it from where I sit, and I have an addiction background, I got my start in alcohol research, I didn't used to think that UPF were addictive, and now I do, because the evidence base has grown. We know from clinical trials that people overeat the stuff if they're on a UPF diet relative to a minimally processed diet. So that's piece 1. We know from industry documents research that food is intentionally being engineered to make people overeat it. That's point 2. And third, we know from neuroscience research, and literally the director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, that if you image people's brains, the footprint, the neurological footprint of dopamine in the brain, the signature for carbohydrates, refined carbohydrates, as David Kessler refers to this, white flour and as well as sugars, looks almost identical to the signature for nicotine. And we also know that these companies worked very closely over a 45-year period in the 20th century with the tobacco industry on learning and sharing R&D on how to formulate this food. And so I think that once we start to see courts saying, it's kind of like what's going on with social media. Maybe there is something to this idea of food addiction, and start putting together the evidence, then we're in a position for state attorneys general to come to the table and say, hey, guess what? We have consumer protection laws. And if somebody is designing food without telling people that it's addictive, then that changes the whole calculation. And so I think that on the litigation front, when you go back and you dial back the clock and you look at how we went from a nation where almost half of us smoked to one where 12% of us smoke, and the people who do wish they could quit. How did we get there? It was through a combination of litigation and exposing industry practices that were deceptive and applying consumer protection laws to those products, as well as wise regulatory strategies, taxation, warning labels, resubsidization, all of school, getting everybody on the same page, and through incremental reforms, essentially turning back the clock to where we were 40 years ago before these UPF firms came into our markets and colonized them.
It's so interesting, the parallels between like big food and big tobacco. When I first started covering this, it was so taboo to mention them in the same sentence. Like, I mean, the trade groups would be like, don't, you have to eat. It's totally different than tobacco. And now fast forward to like, there's so many parallels in part because of the litigation that we're almost just kind of like, well, they are now in the same sentence. And part of that is because of all the documents that you've uncovered showing sort of the incredible overlap. But even just our thinking about it has changed a lot in terms of like how we just think about these companies and their relation to other, tobacco. It used to always be seen as different. I feel like that gap is starting to close in a little bit.
Yeah, you can't argue with people's experience. And there are a lot of people who have tried a GLP-1 drug and said, my God, I can't believe it. I was thinking about food all day and suddenly I'm not.
It gives you a shield against your food
and
environment.
their family members. I mean, it's stunning. And those drugs also work on other substances of abuse, like alcohol. And so I think that there's people I work over in the medical school with a lot of people who treat eating disorders. People don't binge on lettuce, right? Yeah. Binge eating disorders about 10% of the population. We didn't really talk about eating disorders until we had UPF in the market in the 80s, right? Wow. And of course, a lot of that food was, once we started to gain weight as a population, a lot of that food was about dieting, right? Which then puts the whole population on a yo-yo diet.
Which is very bad for your health.
Very bad for your health.
Yeah.
And so I think that we really have to step back and look at this picture in a very holistic way. I'm very encouraged. I think it's important for the court system to entertain this conversation and think about whether consumers are being manipulated or not. I think it's very important.
It kind of feels, though, like we're at this point where, what's the saying, like you're bringing a knife to a gunfight? Like, I mean, it feels like we're a little bit in that phase still where, like, we're starting to have this conversation, but the enormity of it in terms of like how much of the food supply. And I think this is so important in the context of school food too, because of where we are. All of the kids that are eating school food have grown up in this food environment where when they go to the store, 70% of what's offered is ultra-processed foods, and it's not formulated to be a reduced fat Dorito or a whole grain rich, lower sodium Smart Slice from Domino's, which is a thing. And I mean, it really is, but you can't buy it. You can't go buy it, but the schools can buy it. So we have we have all these pallets, all these, millions of kids who are used to getting ultra processed foods in the grocery store, because that's our food environment. And now we're trying to change hearts and minds and palates in schools. I mean, that is also part of it. Well, is that it's the context around school meals matters, I think. Like,
if you turn the clock back to the 1960s, you would have seen people selling cigarettes, candy stripers in the hospital selling cigarettes to sick people, okay? So that's called normalizing an addictive substance, right?
That's
making
wild.
It cool, making it normal, right? Okay, so we've done this before. This is not rocket science. We know how to fix this, and it's a combination.
It's turning around the
Toolkit.
Titanic.
It is turning around the Titanic. It's big, but it's not impossible. So is cigarettes.
So we're gonna, in just a couple of minutes, we're gonna do audience questions. Before we get to that, I wanna go back to Erin for a minute. When you think back to, I think every time I've ever talked to an early adopter school food service leader, they're always like, it's been a journey. Like, it's been a long journey, and you don't just go 0 to 60. Take us through like the beginning. You mentioned all the frozen pizzas. I can still taste like what one of those pizzas tastes like from when I was in school. Like, we ate a lot of pizza. What are like the first steps? So like the folks that have not been on this journey, when a school food service comes to you and they're like, I want to start. Like, I'm not at the point where I'm ditching ultra processed products writ large, but I just want to start. Like, and are those folks coming to you and saying like, how did you start? Like, what were the first steps? Because it's not going from the 15 pizzas to scratch cooking.
I wish it were, but no, it's not. And I think we can all collectively smell the plastic that was on that pizza.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, you all know exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Pizza.
Weird, right?
Yeah.
So I think it starts with, for operators, like, is this good? Is this something I want to eat? Right? Very basic questions. And if the answers are no and absolutely not, then let's question why we're doing that.
Yeah.
We don't have to keep doing that, right? It's the candy stripers handing out cigarettes. Like, well, maybe if we stopped and thought about, like, is this good? We could stop doing that. So I think it starts with some of that awareness. And I also like to say, pick one thing, right? Start with one thing. This didn't happen overnight. We didn't get rid of packaged processed pizza in a week, a month, even a year. So find one thing that you can start chipping away at. For any operators in the room, I like to look at a velocity report. Look at what you're spending the most money on. Start there, right? It may not be your number one item, although pizza probably is in that top 10. But if there's an area that you can start chipping away at, do that one thing. And in school food, talk about it, talk about it, talk about it. Tell your students, tell your parents, tell your school board, tell anyone who's willing to listen, and that's the platform you want to take. I think that's so important that we don't always remember that we tell our story, right? We forget to remind kids that, oh, that had this delicious ingredient, or that was from this farm. So the more that we can tell the story, I think the more impactful it's going to be. And once you start with that one choice, that one local purchase, that one decision that you've made, the next one actually becomes a little bit easier, and you can start finding more areas to take advantage. We talked about that packaged processed pizza. Today, guess how many packaged processed pizza varietals I have on my shelves? 0! Oh. Come on, right? But
They would have let you had one. It's okay.
I appreciate that. I feel like that I could have had it. No, but it starts with that awareness, right? What am I doing? I asked all my staff, which one's good? They're like, none of them. I was like, what?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think it's looking for those changes. We did move to that Domino's Smart Slice.
Smart Slice.
I can't even say it, so I shouldn't serve it. But it was the realization that we spent $1 million on that Domino's contract. Now that was many, many years ago, so thank God. But having the awareness of, what are we doing? And is that serving? This goes back to that idea of, if a kid has Domino's at school, it's whole grain, it's low fat, it's all these things you can't get at Domino's in your town. Yeah. And then you go home and you're like, hey, I want Domino's. It's great. I get it at school. Give me a chocolate milk, call it a day. But it's a totally different experience. So these are the pieces that as operators we have to really look at. Not only is it compliant, does it taste good, are kids gonna like it, but are we setting them up for an easy choice? Is that healthy choice the default choice? Not when there's a bunch of copycat snacks, not when it's hard to understand those differences. So today we make our pizza in-house, and I have to plug that it's because of the kitchen infrastructure and training grants that we've been able to get to buy the equipment, to buy double pizza impingers, to be able to make that pizza in 3.5 minutes from start to finish, because I'm making about 50 of them at one, right?
Wow.
Like, these are the things we have to do. I have to get more skilled staff. I have to make sauce. There's a lot more pieces now, but we wouldn't have been able to do that if we were stuck in, well, this is the way we've always done it. So let's have pizza in a square and a circle and a round and a boat and a.
Does
right?
the staff eat the pizza?
Now they do.
Yeah.
Now they do. And here's the wild part. It's about flavor. So our students really want things that taste great. So the most popular flavors aren't just cheese and pepperoni. It's barbecue chicken. It's a margarita pizza with fresh arugula on top, a little balsamic glaze. Let's get some flavor in with kids, right? Who tried out at the reception? There was a funky little pita chip with some pink dust on it. Who tried it?
I did. It was so good.
That is some real school food, friends. That is a whole grain pita chip with red wine vinegar powder and nigella seed. We call it a no salt and vinegar chip because that red wine vinegar powder doesn't add sodium. So how do we make food taste good while still respecting these ingredients? Those are some of the
Bring the
secrets.
pizza next time.
Yeah. He's like, I'll try it.
I should travel with an impinger. That would be great.
I love it. Okay, we have time for some questions. Does someone have a microphone, or how's this going to work? I'm not 100% sure. Okay, so the first question I have here is, are there ways to accelerate the rollout? 5 to 10 years seems like a long time when we know the direction we want to go. Good question for AB 1264. Who wants to jump in? Accelerating rollout? I mean, I guess the deadline is what it is. But
I mean, I think it's something that's probably cemented. It would require a new bill, and we would run into very...
do you have time on your hands to do that,
Yeah.
Brian? Are you offering?
Me in Sacramento, like this. I think it would be kind of impossible.
What about just like the implementation of this general direction? Like, do you think?
I have thoughts.
Okay, yeah.
The UPF ban puts us all on a path that is great. It's also incredibly complicated. Like, actually coming up with a definition. I mean, you heard about how complicated it's going to be to actually get there. You have also heard about how, frankly, unnecessary it is when school food service operators are supported in doing what we're hearing Aaron talk about. So it's making sure they have the infrastructure, the staff. I mean, I'm a broken record on this, but like, it is really possible now. And the ban is important. It is groundbreaking. But it is also possible to do it without the ban, as Aaron has shown.
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
That's the quick path.
Maybe the next question we can take from the audience, and then we'll switch back.
Thanks for the talk. There's one from industry here, and I'm from industry, so I want to just give. First of all, we run a restaurant group and a regional food service manufacturing company. I sit on the advisory board for the International Food Service Manufacturers, and there is optimism. And I'll start with a few points. First is, if you look at food stocks on the publicly traded markets, they're down for the last 5 to 10 years. They're underperforming the S&P 500. Maybe in the last few months they have because of tech, et cetera. But the reason is consumption is down on packaged foods. And that is the best sign. I go to a lot of the trade shows and conferences, and the most regulatory changes are good, but the consumer voice is the strongest. There is nothing that beats that. And the good news is young consumers, maybe not K through 12, they are voting by not eating these foods. So I think there is an optimism there. Second, money does matter. We operate a salad group. To make a custom-made salad with made from scratch dressing is $3 to $4. Okay, that's with packaging, compostable. If you want, then you need a staff, and you know this, Aaron. You have to wash it. That takes staffing. So at $4 per meal, it takes 3 to 4 to do a salad, and that's not addictive, right? From that standpoint there. And I am, and people say the free market may be a problem. I think the free market can help a lot, and the reason being is they're going to be, it takes a lot to fund kitchens in all schools. And I think regional manufacturers can be very nimble, and we do this. We just did a test with Hayward. We're testing healthy food, tasty food, and ChatGPT, I put in our products, and I ran it through ChatGPT. It says, you adhere to 1264. Our products do that already. So I think regional manufacturers would love to go after national competition, national manufacturers. So, and I think and school districts are fragmented, and they can work with regional manufacturers. And I think, as I'm on the advisory board of the bread project, the Berkeley Food Institute, and I always say, if you do not include business in this process, you will not succeed. And I think if you have that, you get that regional manufacturing innovation, it can go a long way to helping students.
Yeah. Does anyone want to comment on that?
We need a lot of food.
Yeah,
We need a lot of food.
Yeah.
We need a lot of food. So the more partnership, the more connectedness we have. And I think what's going to help us the most is this definition. Now that we're all working off the same sheet of music with what's going to come out, we can partner with industry and say, we don't want things with this. Even in partnering with Eat Real, when we had our sugar standard before the law came out, we looked at nothing with more than 12 grams of added sugar. We went back to our bakery and we said, look, we're not going to buy this packaged muffin anymore. It's too high in sugar. So local bakery, hey, you want to work with us? Help us lower the sugar. We thought we were being really helpful with ideas. We were like, you could use some pumpkin puree. You could put some beet in there. We thought we had all the ideas. Do you know what they did? They removed granulated sugar.
And it was
to meet our standard,
Yeah.
right? So I do think there's a lot of opportunity for partnership when we ask the right questions and we're playing from the same sheet of music.
I will say I spent the last couple days eating school meals and talking to folks around here doing school food service, and I came across, there were a few examples of smaller companies trying to fill this gap. Like, you know, maybe it's bread or other products where they were like, oh, I know this is coming. And I don't know which of you told me that it's like called these are like the ankle biters. Like they're coming in, they're going to try to take market share from these bigger national players because they're like catering to the California market. So in that way, I think that the industry very much will adapt to meet. I mean, California is obviously the biggest school food market, but like it's like what, a quarter of the U.S. economy? I don't know, it's a lot. Fourth largest economy if it was just the state or something. Somebody fill in. You guys are California. It's fourth
largest economy.
Yeah, fourth
in the
largest
world.
economy. I think it used to be eighth, so you're climbing the ranks. But I do see kind of examples like that cropping up. And certainly the school food service market. I mean, just to be clear, like school meals, I think it's $24 billion a year, 25 maybe from just looking at breakfasts and lunches, I believe. So this is not a small, I mean, it's small compared to the rest of the food industry, but it's a meaningful chunk of the market. So does anyone else have a question? You have the mic? Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Bria, and I am a plant-based manufacturer, so I take organic jackfruit and turn it into clean plant-based meat alternatives, as well as creating products that utilize the jackfruit, so like taquitos, pizza rolls, and all those wonderful food options. And so the question that I have is, since it appears that California is in the phase of kind of like revitalizing or revamping the food system and making it more inclusive, right, through the UPFs band as well as the universal school meals, has there been any discussions or intent when it comes to providing more inclusive options for students with specific dietary needs? And if so, like, what does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we want to
I
jump in?
have some familiarity here.
Yeah.
So thank you for providing products in the marketplace, because what we see now is students are eating a variety of different things and not always under a specific label. So we find a lot of students may eat plant-forward or plant-based today. They may choose a high-quality protein of animal source the next day. So for us as operators to make sure that we're providing not just a meatless option, we're really good at putting cheese in things. But having things that are authentic, having things that are delicious, having alternative sources. I love the idea of more jackfruit in schools. We didn't hear about that 5-10 years ago. So it's exciting that we have manufacturers who are bringing new things to the table and introducing them to schools. We have a plant-based chicken product that we use that many of our students enjoy, and we've made a plant-based chicken and waffles with a whole grain waffle and plant-based chicken.
Wow.
It outperforms the animal protein option. Isn't that wild?
Interesting.
And so I think we find that students want choice, they want flexibility, and they want to know that no matter what label it has, that it's good. When food is good, it doesn't matter what label it has. It's that universal feeling of, I want to eat this. This is really delicious. Kids are the same way. I don't think we give them enough credit as really coming into this space as being educated, as being aware consumers. I had a conversation with a 5-year-old last week, and they told me they wanted fish on the menu. 5. And I was like, what kind of fish are you eating at home? Salmon. This blew my mind, right? These are things that we don't give credit to kids for. So to offer a variety of options that will meet these standard definitions, that taste great, more power to you. Get into schools.
Yeah, great question. I think we have time for one more quick.
do.
Can
I'm
we
gonna
squeeze
come
it in?
over here
Okay.
for my Oprah
Or
Winfrey
maybe two. I
moment.
don't want to get wild, but yeah. If you're quick.
Oh my God, I'm like starstruck. I want signatures and everything. So I had to write everything down because I don't want to. I really loved everything that was shared, and especially Brazil was brought up. One thing Brazil does is heavily tax the final junk food. And they took the tax code to another level. And that's something that we need to really talk about as commodities. How we, school operators, the Department of War or Defense, funds not only fast food in this country, but K through 12 food. And regardless of USDA saying it's 15 to 20% of our budget, it carries our menu for 9 months. All of the proteins, the grains, the seed oils, all of that. And it's heavily relied on through schools around the nation. And AB 1264 omits commodity products. So that's our, I think, next conversation that I would love to have with this group, is the finished product of when you divert these commodities of grain, protein, whatever it is, to a burrito or, you know, a pizza. I mean, I call it open-faced sandwich. Everyone demonizes pizza. But anyways, there are
That's a
things we can do.
rebrand. That's what we call a rebrand.
That's right, a rebrand. And cheese, we add cheese because it's one of the big ones from commodities that's cheaply given to us in schools to use in our. So I'd love to talk more about ag and junk food in this country and how it was subsidized like tobacco leaves. And then education. So SNAP-Ed, back in 2000s, California did a lot of work around nutrition education in schools, to set up farm to school, to set up sequenced K through 12 education. I'm not talking brushing your teeth. I'm talking that kindergartner is going to learn 3 months straight why a fresh apple is better than apple slice. You know, talking to those fundamentals is our education. I would love to talk more about that and what it costs, because in a 13-minute meal period, we're trying to have crunch time, teach them what to eat, choose from the salad bar, move it along, catch up with your buddies, and eat your food. So we need that help in the classroom.
Yeah, all good points. I think the time to eat is another one that we don't talk about enough. We went to eat school lunch with your kindergartner yesterday, and it was I couldn't finish eating in the amount of time allotted.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard, and they struggle with that. There's a lot of pieces to this.
Lunchtime is not considered instructional time, so it is cannibalized for instructional time. And school food service professionals are not considered educators. And these are two things that I really wish we could fix at the federal level.
Yeah.
Opportunity, right?
Yeah,
I feel like this is our next
yeah.
opportunity. I do think that Kat touched on something really important, and as amazing as these new bills are, and we're really excited to start seeing progress here, it is a miss that USDA foods are omitted from this. If we're going to have language around ingredients that are concerning that we shouldn't eat, why is it okay if the government gives it to us?
Yeah.
Do we have a protection? And maybe I didn't know. Right? It doesn't work like that. So it's really important that we're consistent in our messaging. And if we're saying that here, this is dangerous and should be watched and we shouldn't consume this, it needs to be the same throughout the whole system. So I really appreciate that, Kat. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a complex system, even just talking about the different pieces. Thank you all so much. This was such a great conversation. I hope you all got a lot out of it. I think panelists will stick around for a minute to talk if you want. I'm not sure if I'm passing off to anyone to say goodnight. If not, enjoy your evening, and thank you so much for coming. Thanks.